Hello and welcome to today's lecture for GE 103 Introduction to Computing and Data Structures. For today's lecture, we will be changing gears a little bit. So, as you have observed so far, all the concepts that we have talked about, uh, we have used computer programming in that. Right. So, the basic idea was in the first half of the course to give you uh, a good amount of knowledge of C programming language. Right. So to talk about the basic constructs, the basic tools of C programming language, which were different kind of functions, header files, variables, expressions, operators, operands, precedence of operators, right? Um, Calling functions, function arguments, call by value, call by reference, right? Control flow in which we had switch, for loop, while, if, conditionals, right? And then pointers, arrays, right? And then essentially once we had all of that, and then of course structures, and then once we learned about all of these, then we used that knowledge to discuss different kind of data structures, right? So we looked at stacks, queues, linked lists, trees, so on, right? So for today's lecture, what we are going to do is we are going to talk about programs and their efficiency, right? So we know that how do we define a program? How do we define an algorithm? It is a set of steps that can be used to solve a given computing problem, right? So if the problem is we have to find the maximum element in an array, then what would be a good algorithm? Good algorithm would be to start from the beginning and then keep on comparing, right? So initially you have your maximum as a of 0, and then you compare with a1, a2, a3, a4, and after each comparison, if you find that the compared element is greater than the stored max that you have, then that element becomes the new max, and then you move on to the next element till you exhaust all the elements. So that essentially is the algorithm that defines the steps, and then based on that we write the code, right? So one important aspect over here is when we are talking about programs, right, to solve problems, when we are talking about algorithms to solve problems, what is their efficiency, right? In other words, what is their complexity? How good or how bad are they, right? So uh, coming up with the complexity, so this complexity analysis gives us a tool using which we can evaluate the performance of different algorithms. So let's say if I want to do a sort on a bunch of elements in an array, then there can be many sorting algorithms. There can be bubble sort, there can be quick sort, there can be insertion sort, there can be radix sort, and so on. There can be heap sort, right? So now the issue is how do I compare them? How do I can I compare bubble sort to quick sort? Can I compare a heap sort to radix sort? So we definitely need some kind of analytical tool, analytical framework that allows us to compare the performance of different algorithms. So in today's class, we'll be introducing that tool, and then to illustrate, uh, we'll be doing a complexity analysis of some basic algorithms. Okay. All right. So now I am on slide 2, which is titled "The Efficiency of Algorithms and or Programs." Okay. The efficiency of algorithms or programs. So as it says, it is not enough to just design an algorithm for a problem that works and gives correct output. So definitely one thing we would want is our algorithm is correct. So if for the case of finding the maximum element, in an array, correct algorithm would be every time you run it, it does indeed give you the maximum element. So that is of course one requirement from the algorithm, from the program, that it should give correct output. Of course, it should handle all the different kind of cases, right? and error conditions, right? So giving correct output is of course one desirable aspect. In addition, the efficiency or cost of the algorithm is also an important consideration. So besides the correctness, the cost is also important. Okay. So why exactly is the cost important? So we see that every program uses hardware resources of the computer, right? So what is going on here is we are opening, if you want to run a C program, let's say we are opening an IDE or integrated development environment. So an example of an IDE could be code blocks. Another example of an IDE could be Eclipse, right? So using that IDE, we are writing our C programs, we are compiling them, and then we are executing them, right? So to execute any program, we definitely need hardware resources. Okay? So many resources are needed. Two of the most important resources are CPU and memory, central processing unit, or processor, or memory, right? So what is the goal of each of them? Very briefly. So the CPU executes the statements or instructions in a program. So whatever C program you have, let's say main include stdio.h main printf welcome to C, right? And then so that is a very simple C program. So what happens is this program has got a set of statements, right? Now for each statement there are equivalent hardware instructions. So again, how do we get those instructions? That's beyond the scope of this course. That comes in compute organization and architecture, which you may take later. But for each statement, equivalent instructions are executed. So each of those instructions are executed on the CPU. Example of instructions could be, there could be a memory location. You go to that memory location and you grab the value of a variable X. Right? That could be one instruction. Another instruction could be you have two variables X and Y with some values. Add both of them and then store the result back in a memory location, right? So essentially all the calculations, all the instructions are executed or run on the or by the CPU. Okay. Memory, before instructions can be executed, they need to be brought into memory. So what happens is your C program, it is running in your IDE, in your Eclipse, or in your code blocks or whatever. So that program is running in its own memory space, right? It's a process, it's a program. It has got its own block of memory which is allocated to it by the operating system. So it's running in its block of memory. And before we can execute the instructions, the program, we need to bring in those instructions. We need to transport them from the memory to the CPU. So the CPU also has its own storage. So then essentially what we do is we bring those instructions and data from the memory to the CPU. Okay. So then the calculations happen and then the output is again written back to the memory. Okay. So in this way, whatever program you're running, solving different kind of problems, the common factor is all those programs are using the CPU. Okay, and all these programs are using the memory. Okay, now I am on slide 3 and the title of this is measuring algorithm performance. So slide 3, measuring algorithm performance. So we just saw that each C statement or instruction that has to be executed by the CPU, and each instruction will take certain amount of time. So maybe in some milliseconds, right? Each memory access will also take some time. So you have to go to a particular memory location and you have to read the data from that, and then you have to copy it maybe to a CPU, to some CPU storage. So accessing each memory location will also take some amount of time. Okay. So while designing efficient algorithms, the main goal is to design an algorithm that makes economical use of both the CPU and the memory. So make economical use of both CPU and memory. So while solving a problem, if you are using, if you can make minimum use of the CPU and still solve the problem, right? Eventually, what will happen is you'll get the correct answer, and it will also you'll get the correct answer in minimum amount of time. So let's say you can, you're running a program, and then let's say to solve the problem, that algorithm takes 100 instructions, just as an example. And then let's say you do some thinking, and you come up with a better algorithm that can solve the same problem using only 50 instructions. So then definitely the second option is better. It uses lesser number of instructions, so it takes lesser amount of time. Okay. So likewise, we can think in similar ways about how many memory accesses are there going to be. If you can minimize the number of memory accesses, that is another way to reduce the time. So main idea is to make economical use of CPU and memory both, and this will make the algorithm run fast or as quickly as possible. Okay. So key question here is, how do we measure this efficiency for algorithms? We clearly need a model for this, and we characterize an algorithm's efficiency or performance in terms of its input size. So which means if I'm sorting an array and the size of array is n, which means the array has n elements, then what is the efficiency or what is the performance? How can I measure that? If I'm creating a binary tree and the tree has let's say 50 nodes, right? So here n is 50. So then for n, how can I measure the algorithm's efficiency or performance? So the algorithm could be adding a node to the tree, right? Algorithm could be searching for a node in the tree. Algorithm could be for printing the tree, so on. So we measure the algorithm's efficiency or performance in terms of its input size, which is n. Okay. Right, now I am on slide 4, which is titled Algorithm Performance. So slide 4, Algorithm Performance. So continuing from slide 3, we are talking about measuring algorithm performance. So as an example, consider an algorithm that finds a maximum among all elements in an array. Okay. So you're given an array, and if elements are arranged. So let's say we can assume that they are not sorted. Now, once they're sorted, then finding the maximum is quite easy. It's always the last one. So let's say that they're jumbled up, they're unsorted, to make it a bit more interesting. So now consider the following two array sizes, A10, A1000. Question is, for which input size will the algorithm that finds a maximum take more time? Right. So intuitively we can see that it will take more time for the second array, which has 1000 elements. Okay. Because you have a larger size, so eventually you have to search the whole array. So searching and performing operations or comparisons on larger array would take more time, right? So we can say intuitively that the algorithm would probably take more time for, would definitely take more time for the second array, the larger array. Okay. So next issue is how to measure the performance of the algorithm. So in this particular algorithm, we can measure the performance by counting the number of comparisons between current max and the current array element. Because think about it, what do we need to do? We first set A0 as the max, right? Whatever it is. And then what we do is we visit A1, compare max with the A1. If A1 is greater than max, then max is equal to A1, right? And then compare with A2. If A2 is greater than max, max is A2. Of course, if A1 or A2 is not greater than max, then the old max remains. So the question is, every time we compare the current max, which can be an int, with the next array element. If the next array element is greater than the current max, max is updated to the next array element, if the next array element is not greater than or is less than max, old max remains. So we can assume here that there are no duplicates just to make things easy. We can easily handle the duplicate case later. So the key operation over here is, in this algorithm, is the comparison operation. So we are comparing current max with next element. So simple comparison, right, is essentially what we are doing. Okay. So you go to the next compare and then again go to the next compare, go to the next compare. Keep on doing that till you reach the last element of the array. So number of comparisons is the key operation. Okay, now I am on slide number 5. So this one also, like slide 4, is titled algorithm performance. So slide 5. So so we just determined that the comparison is the key operation here for finding the maximum. Comparison between the current maximum element and the next array element. So we observe that A1000 will have more comparisons than A10, because again eventually you have to walk through the whole array, right? So A1000 will have more comparisons than A10. So it will take more time for the algorithm to execute on A1000, because each comparison will take time, right? AI is less than max, so less than. Both of those, both max and AI, are stored in certain memory locations. So you have to go there, you have to compare, and then you get a true or false, right? So that comparison operation takes certain amount of time. So it's easy to see that more comparisons would translate to taking more time. So how many comparisons for A10? 9, because A0 already is in max, and so you have to look at A1 up till A9. Okay, so one less, so 9. How many comparisons for A1000? 999. So if we generalize, how many comparisons for AN? N minus 1. So we observe that for an input size of n, right, for an array AN, the number of comparisons would be n minus 1, right? So I hope you can see that. So hence we say that the complexity of this algorithm is n minus 1, of the order of n minus 1. And generally for large values of n, we can ignore the minus 1. So if n is 1000, so then whether we have 999 comparisons or whether we have 1000 comparisons, the time to execute both of them would be almost same. So we ignore the minus 1 for large n. So roughly we say that the complexity of the algorithm that finds the maximum element in an unsorted array is of the order of n, which means for an input size of n elements, we will have n comparisons. So complexity is of the order of n. Okay. So for n elements we have, because for n elements we have n comparisons. So number of comparisons is n, therefore complexity is n. So you can see what we did here. For this algorithm, we first determined what the key operation was. So here we have one. In other algorithms we can have multiple operations as well, as we'll see. So here we have only one operation, which is the comparison. So then what we did was we generalized for an array of n elements how many comparisons we will have, and that becomes the complexity of the order of n. Okay, so now I am on slide number 6, which is titled linear search versus binary search. So what we'll do now is we'll do a small case study in which we will compare two search algorithms. So we've already discussed both of these, and what we'll do is we'll compare both of them in terms of the complexity. Linear search versus binary search. So complexity of an algorithm means the number of basic operations done by the algorithm for an input of size n. So we're given an input size, and in order to calculate the complexity, we first have to determine what is the what are the key operations that we are doing in this algorithm, right? So because the algorithm is already given, is with us, we have to now analyze its complexity. So first we determine which are the key operations. Once we do that, then for an input size n, we have to figure out how many of those key operations are performed. So in the previous algorithm for finding maximum, key operation was comparison, and we determined for input of size n operations were needed. So complexity becomes n. So now we look at linear search and binary search. Right. So first question is, what is the complexity of linear search? Before we answer that question, we need to think what about the operation that we perform in linear search. So again, in linear search, what happens is you are given it's a very simple algorithm. You're given the array as input with certain elements in it, and then what you do is you start at one end and then you compare, right? And you're also given the search element. So you start at one end, compare with A0, compare search element. If they match, algorithm ends, you're done. If there is no match, then you go to A1. And again, if there's a match, you're done. If there's no match, you go to A2. And like that, you visit all the array elements. So, of course, we can see here also, key operation is comparison. What is the comparison between? It is between the search element and the array element, right? So A0, A1, A2, A3. So we start at the beginning and keep going, we keep going till the end, right? So this is a linear search. Very simple algorithm, right? Okay, so now I am on slide number 7. Slide 7. So what is the minimum number of comparisons possible for linear search? Well, if we get extremely lucky, the first comparison we do, we get a match in that. So let's say first array element is 2 and your search element is also 2. Again, here we assume no duplicates. So if we get extremely lucky, then our first comparison itself will be a success. So therefore, minimum number of comparisons possible is, of course, 1. Okay. What is the maximum number of comparisons? Well, in the worst case, we would have to end up examining all the elements. So it depends, you may get lucky in your first comparison, or you may find a match in second, third, fourth. We don't really know. But in the worst case, you will have to examine all the elements of the array. So what this means is, provided there are no duplicates, and provided that the search element exists in the array, while doing linear search, you are guaranteed to find it, find the element in the array after n comparisons. So after you have looked at all the elements. So in the worst case, the last comparison that you do, it will be a success. So here what we have is, we have a best case complexity and average case complexity. Worst case complexity. So best case complexity is of the order of 1, in which first comparison itself is a success and we find the element in the array. But the worst case complexity is of the order of n. So because we have to do n comparisons, we have to look at all of them, and that's what, in the worst case, we don't have to do more than n comparisons. So worst case complexity is of the order of n, because we have to look at all the elements, all n elements in the worst case. Okay. So that is for linear search. Now, what about the complexity for binary search? So recall the binary search procedure that we discussed in chapter 4. So just to refresh, we have included the code for that function in the next slide, slide number 8. So let us go to slide 8 and refresh on the binary search code. Okay, now I am on slide number 8. So as you can see, this shows the binary search procedure, C code for that. So if you recall, the one condition for binary search was the array has to be sorted beforehand. Okay. So the input we assume is an array A which is sorted. Okay. So in which we have elements arranged in ascending order. So it's easy for the algorithm to work in if elements are arranged in descending order as well. But we'll only look at the ascending order case. So it could be 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, something like that. So the elements are sorted. We're given the array, we're given the size of the array, how many elements, and we are given the search element. So if you recall, basic idea was find the middle array element, right? And then compare the search element with a mid. It's a three-way decision. One option is you have a hit. If you have a hit, you find the you have found the element, and what this function will do is it will return the index where you found the element. Right. So if the first element of the array was has a match with the search element, then it returns 0. For second element, it returns 1 and so on. Okay, so it will return the index where you find the element. Okay. Again, assumption is element exists in the array, right? So, calculate the mid index, compare search element with the a of mid. Either it's a match or the search element is greater than a mid, in which case you have to traverse the right part of the array. So interestingly, the element will not be there in the left part of the array, because left part of the array, all the elements here are smaller than a mid, and you've just determined that search element is greater than a mid, so it has to be in the right half. Third option could be search element is smaller than a mid. In that case, you look at the left half. So what's happening is you have low, high, mid index values. To start with, low is 0, high is size minus 1. So size here is same as n, what we have been talking about. So while low is less than equal to high, calculate mid. If search element is less than a mid, left part of the array, low remains same, high is mid minus 1 index. Else if search element is greater than a mid, high is same, low is mid plus 1, again the index. Else, third option, you have a match, return mid. So keep on traversing the while loop. If the element is not there, then you get out of the while loop. Yeah, you don't do return mid, right? So note that mid will change. So if the element is not there, that case is also handled by returning minus 1. So if you exit the while, it automatically means you were not able to find the element. So this is the code. Okay, so I hope now that code is refreshed, right? Right. Now I am on slide 9. So note that we are talking about binary search now. Main idea is so that we can do the complexity analysis of binary search. So given an array of size n, we can figure out what the complexity will be. Okay. So we can see what the key operations are, and then for us input of size n, we can come up with how many operations of those key operations will we have, right? So binary search, this is the procedure. Given a sorted array and the search element, we calculate the middle element. Next, we compare middle element of the array with search element. Search element is less than mid, we look in the left subarray. Repeat steps 1 and 2. So we have a reduced array, we're dealing with a reduced array here. If the search element is greater than mid, we look in the right subarray and repeat steps 1 and 2, right? Again, we will be working on a reduced array. Again, we calculate mid. Third option is if the search element is equal to mid, we have a match. So question for us is how many comparisons will binary search perform on an array of size n? That's what we have to answer. So the approach we'll take is we'll look at some sample arrays of different values of n, and then we'll try to determine how many comparisons we have, and then we'll see if we can generalize that. Okay. All right, so now I am on slide number 10. Okay, slide 10. So here we see a picture in which we do an illustration of binary search for some different values of n arrays. So first we see array is A and n is, what is n? 2 elements. So let's say search element is 4. So let's go through the procedure. So what is low? Low here is 0 index, high here is 1, and mid is 0 plus 1 by 2. So note the brackets because we first want to add and then we want to divide, because by default the division has greater precedence than plus. So but here we want to do the addition first and then the division. So mid is 0 plus 1 by 2, so 1 by 2. This is integer division, so which is 0. Okay. So we compare search element which is 4 with the a of mid, a of 0, 2. So we see that search element is greater than a mid. So this is our key operation, a comparison between search element and a mid. Right. So in linear search, it again was a comparison between search element and ai, where I was 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, right, all the way till n minus 1. So here it's the comparison is between search element and a mid. So a mid is a0. So in this case, search element is greater than a mid because 4 is greater than 2. So we have to look in the right subarray. So which means low is mid plus 1. Mid value is 0. So 0 plus 1, 1. H is 1. So both L and H are 1. And therefore M or mid is also 1. 1 plus 1 by 2, 1. So now search element and a mid we compare, we get a hit. So NC. So here note that NC is a number of comparisons. I forgot to write that in the legend on the right. But NC, N subscript C is the number of comparisons. So 2 comparisons we have underlined in red, right, for a array of size 2. What about array of size 4? So here let's say search element is 8. What is low? Low is 0. What is high? High is 3. Mid is low plus high divided by 2. 0 plus 3 by 2. 3 by 2, which is 1. So we compare search element and A1. Search element which is 8 is greater than a mid, which is 4. So we look at the right subarray. So low is mid plus 1. Old mid is 1. So 1 plus 1, 2. H is 3. So mid is 2 plus 3 by 2. 5 by 2, 2. Right. So now note that because the search element in the previous case was greater than a mid, which was a1, which was 4. So now we look at the right subarray of 2 elements, 6 and 8. Right. So now we find the mid here is mid is 2. So a of 2 is 6. So again we find that like before, search element is greater than a mid because 8 is greater than a of 2, which is 6. So again we look at the right subarray. Now low is mid, old mid plus 1, old mid is 2, 2 plus 1, 3. H is also 3. Right. So mid is 3 plus 3 by 2, 6 by 2, which is 3. So eventually we have our match. So you see every time after we compare, the size of the array is reduced, chopped up. So to roughly half. So now if we see how many comparisons did we have here, first we compared with A1, then we compared with A2, then we compared with A3. 3 comparisons. Right. So what we see here is for a 2 element array, number of comparisons is 2. Right. And for a 4 element array, number of comparisons is 3. So it would be a good idea for you to look at arrays of size 8 and 16 and then see in the worst case how many comparisons there will be. So again, note this is the worst case. In the first example array, search element could very well have been 2, in which case one comparison. In the second case of 4 element array, search element could very well have been 4, in which again only one comparison. But here we want to find the worst case complexity. So we're looking at the number of comparisons in the worst case. Right? So in both cases, you see that element we're looking for is the last one. Okay. Okay. So now I am on slide 11. So now, as we know, the goal is to try to figure out for size of n with n elements in the array, can we generalize and find out how many comparisons we will have. So we saw two cases. So we have this table. One, we have n as a number of elements. One is nc, number of comparisons. So for n is 2. The first example we did, we had 2 comparisons. We can write 2 as 1 plus 1. And then for n is equal to 4, we had 3 comparisons. We can write it as 2 plus 1. And if you do it for 8, we'll see in the worst case, we'll have 4 comparisons, which means we can write it as 3 plus 1. Okay. So the idea is can we see a pattern between n and nc? So look at the first column that we have. So we can also write n in terms of powers of 2. Right. So 2 is 2 to the power 1. Right. 4 is 2 raised to power 2. 8 is 2 raised to power 3. Right. So we can make that generalization. Right. And now please see the correlation between this n, which is in the first column, and nc, which is in the last column. So try to observe the correlation between column 1 and column 3, n and nc. So if you see the power for n and the first term in the number of comparisons. So for each comparisons we have some x plus 1, right? So 1 plus 1, 2 plus 1, 3 plus 1. So some x plus 1. So note that that x that we have and the power, they have a exact match. So for the first row, 2 raised to 1, and then the x term you see is 1. For second term, 2 raised to 2, the x term in the x plus 1 on the last column you see, that 2 and that 2 are same. And then 2 raised to 3, the 3 in n, the power 3 in n, and the 3 plus 1, the 3 in that. So same, it's a correlation. Now how do we generalize? So let's say for n, we can generalize to 2 raised to k. Right? So note that because we have k in the power 2 raised to k, number of comparisons will be k plus 1. Right? It's x plus 1. So k and k are same, and then plus 1. Right? So I hope this table is clear. Okay. So all we're doing is we are seeing the value of n and the number of comparisons, and we see a correlation between when we write n in terms of power of 2, that power, the exponent, and then the number of comparisons, the x plus 1, the x part. Okay. Okay. So now it's easy to see that what is the value of k. K will be the number of comparisons when number of elements is n. So we can see why, because for the first row, the power is 1 and 1 plus 1. Right? For row 2, power is 2, and then in the last row 2 plus 1. So number of comparisons is, we can say is k. Well, k plus 1, but we can approximate it to k. right? So I hope you can see that k is the number of comparisons for input size of n, right? So then how do we calculate k? Alright, so now I am on slide 12. So in the previous slide we saw that k is the number of comparisons for n, right? So we can easily make the relation that 2 raised to k is equal to n from the previous slide, right? Because 2 raised to 1 is 2, 2 raised to 2 is 4, 2 raised to 3 is 8. So then 2 raised to k is n, right? So 2 raised to k is n, therefore k is log 2n, log to the base 2n. Okay. Therefore, because k is the number of operations for input size n for binary search, we say the complexity of binary search is of the order of log n. Okay, it's of the order of log n. So generally it's pretty good. Log n is considered to be very good, very low complexity, and you can see in this table one column is n and the other is log of n, log to the base 2n. So you can see as you increase the value of n, the value of log n does not increase that much. For example, for n is 1024, log n is only 10. So which means for an array of size 1024, only 10 operations. But and for an array of size 32,768, so big jump from 1000, more than roughly 30 times. But log n only increases from 10 to 15. So you can see that as n goes up, the savings you get in terms of log n will become even more. So which means so that this n here stands for linear search and log n stands for binary search. So when you have small number of elements, the difference is not that big. Fine. For n is for 4 elements, 4 comparisons in linear search, 2 in binary search. Not much difference. But for 32,768, only 15 comparisons versus the 32,768 comparisons in linear search. So note that in linear search, in the worst case, number of comparisons is equal to number of elements, because each element has to be compared with the search element. So you can see that definitely for larger array sizes, binary search is a lot more efficient. The only thing we have to do is we have to do some extra work in sorting the array, but once we sort it, then our subsequent searches, they become extremely efficient. Okay, so now I am on slide number 13, and here we are going to be talking about one more algorithm for sorting an array of elements. So this is a pretty basic algorithm. It's called bubble sort, and the idea is we'll first discuss how this algorithm works, what are the steps of the algorithm, and then finally we'll perform a complexity analysis on it. So in other words, for an input of size n, for an array of size n, in the worst case, what is the complexity of bubble sort? Okay. So what are the steps of the algorithm? Okay. So again, the input of this algorithm is an array of elements in some random order, and the output is sorted array in ascending order. Okay. So first element will be the smallest, last element will be the largest, so on. Again, assuming no duplicates and assuming an array of integers. So what are the steps of the algorithm? Step 1, start from the left end of the array, A0. So compare A0 with A1, first two elements. If they are out of sequence, so which means if A0 is greater than A1. So again, if you see, let's say A0 is 4 and A1 is 2. So in the final sorted array, is this the correct sequence? It's not. Again, A0 is 4, A1 is 2. That's not a correct sequence. It should be reverse, right? 2 then 4 rather than 4 then 2. So if A0 is greater than A1, if the element on the left is greater than the element on the right, then you swap. So we already know how to swap. We swap them. So which means that now the element in A1, it comes to A0, and element in A0 comes to A1. So 4 2 becomes 2 4. So in the final output, this is how the number should appear. Now compare A1 and A2. So do a right shift, and after that right shift, now compare the next two elements, A1 and A2. Okay, and then similarly, if they are out of sequence, swap them. Then compare A2 and A3, A3 and A4, A4 and A5, so on, and continue till you compare A(n minus 2) and A(n minus 1). So n minus 1 is the last element, of course, because the indexes start from 0 and not 1. Right? So if n is 10, the index of the last element will be 10 minus 1, 9. So continue till you compare A(n minus 2) with A(n minus 1, and then again if they are out of sequence, swap. Now you'll observe that the largest element is at the end, and this ends stage 1. So the largest element is at its appropriate position, and now you can focus on all the elements except the last one. So in stage 2, step 6, consider A0 to A(n minus 2), because A(n minus 1) is already where it is supposed to be in the final output. So consider A0 to A(n minus 2) and repeat steps 1 to 5. Okay. At the end of stage 2, second element is at its appropriate position, and then consider A0 to A(n minus 3), and then the next stage A0 to A(n minus 4), next stage A0 to A(n minus 5, and finally you'll run all out of stages, and the array will be sorted. Okay. So this is the general procedure for this algorithm. And in the next slide, we'll see this algorithm in action. Okay. So now I am on slide 14, and the title of this slide is Bubble Sort Complexity Analysis. So in slide 15, we'll go through this algorithm on the following array: A of 6 equal to 10, 4, 2, 1, 6, 11. Okay. So to do the complexity analysis, we first need to answer some key questions. What are the main operation or operations that we need to consider to evaluate the performance? How do we quantify the main operations? So which means for an input consisting of an array of size n, number of operations performed is x. What is that x? How many stages do we have? So the way we'll work here is we'll try to generalize how many stages we are going to have, and then for each stage we'll try to figure out what are the main operations and how many of those main operations do we have, and then we add all of that together to get the complexity. Okay. Right. So now I am on slide 15, and here we are going through the bubble sort algorithm on our input array. Okay. So here we can see that we have divided the working of the algorithm into different stages. So our initial algorithm given is initial array is given here: 10, 4, 2, 1, 6, 11. Okay. So now we compare A0 and A1. 10 and 4, they are out of sequence, of course, because in the final array 4 should come before 10, right? So therefore they are out of sequence. We swap them. So swapping them, 4 takes 10's place and 10 takes 4's place. Now we do a right shift and compare 10 and 2. Out of sequence we swap them. So 10 2 becomes 2 10. Now comparing 10 and 1, again out of sequence, swap them. So 10 1 becomes 1 10. 10 6 compare, out of sequence, swap them, 6 10. 10 11 we compare, this time they are in sequence, So we let them. There is no swap. So now we have examined all the elements. We're at the end of stage 1, and interestingly we'll note that the largest element is at its appropriate position, 11. Right? Well, anyway it was, but even if it wasn't, it would have come there. So now we do the same bubble sort procedure, this time with all the elements except 11. So A0, A1, A2, A3, A4. Okay. So comparing 4 and 2, again A0 and A1, they are out of sequence, swap them. 2 takes 4's place, 4 takes 2's place. 4 and 1 out of sequence, swap them. 4, 1 becomes 1, 4. 4, 6, they are in sequence, no swap. So note that all comparisons don't lead to swaps. Comparing 6 and 10, they are in sequence, no swap. So now we have examined all the elements we had to, and at the end of stage 2 now the last 2 elements are at their appropriate position, 10 and 11. So in the next stage we can forget about 10 and 11. Now look at the first 4, 2, 1, 4, 6. Comparing 2 with 1, start of stage 3, out of sequence, swap them, 1, 2. Comparing 2 and 4, they are within sequence, no swap. Comparing 4 and 6, within sequence, no swap. So now that's the end of stage 3. Last 3 elements are at the appropriate position. Looking at 1, 2, 4, anyway they look sorted, but still we still have to compare and swap if necessary. Comparing 1 and 2, start of stage 4, they are within sequence, no swap. Comparing 2 and 4, within sequence, no swap. So now 4, 6, 10 and 11 are in sequence, end of stage 4. Now we only have to look at 1 and 2. 1 and 2 within sequence, end of stage 5, and now 1 is already at its appropriate position. So now we can say that the array is sorted. So in the first stage we examine elements from A0 to AN-1, and at the end of the first stage we can guarantee that the largest element is guaranteed to be at its appropriate position, which will be under index AN-1. So I hope you can see that. So wherever 11 is in the array, it will be triggered, shifted to the extreme right. So in stage 2, we look at now elements from A0 to AN-2. So at the end of stage 2, the second largest will be at its appropriate position, AN-2. Then look at A0 to AN-3 and so on and so forth. At the end of stage 5, we have only one element, and by default that will be already at its appropriate position. So here you can see this is how bubble sort works, and now if we were to ask ourselves what are the main operations, what would they be? So if you think about it, comparison is there definitely, and swap is there. So these two, comparisons and swaps, and we also note that every comparison does not necessarily lead to a swap. Okay, so I hope now the bubble sort procedure is clear. Okay, so we start with the input array, do bubble sort, and then we are given at the end the sorted array. Okay, so now I am on slide 16. So now we have seen from the previous slide that the key operations are comparisons and swaps. So now the next question is how many of each do we have? How many comparisons? How many swaps for an n element array? So if you look at the previous slide for how many elements did we have in that array? We had 6. So for a 6 element array, how many stages did we have? We had 5. And if you go back, you can check, we have 5 stages. Okay. So if we generalize how many stages for an n element array, it will always be n-1. Because in the last stage, you have only one element, and that element by default is already at its appropriate position. Okay. So for n elements, n-1 stages. So we know that we have n-1 stages. Next task is, in each stage, how many comparisons and swaps do we have? And then we add for all of them. So number of comparisons in stage 1, number of comparisons in stage 2, and so on. Okay. So if you look at the previous case, how many comparisons did we have in stage 1? So 10 and 4, then 10 and 2, then 10 and 3, then 10 and 6, and then 10 and 11. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 comparisons we had, and we had 6 elements. So for stage 1, n minus 1 comparisons. Right, hope it's clear. Stage 2, how many? It's easy to see that it's 1 less than the previous stage. So in the stage 2 over here, you see, because number of comparisons, we have 1 less element to look at, number of comparisons will be less by 1 also. So for 6 elements, we have 5 comparisons in stage 1. Now how many comparisons will we have in stage 2? 4. So likewise, generalizing, for in stage 2 we have n minus 2 comparisons. So we keep on going down. In stage n minus 2 we have 2 comparisons. Stage n minus 1 we have only 1 comparison. So if you see stage 5, n minus 1 is stage 5, where n is 6, we have only 1 and 2 to compare. So 1 comparison. So for stage 1, n minus 1 comparisons, for stage 2, n minus 2 comparisons, and going all the way to 3 to 1. So now what is the total number of comparisons of all stages? 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4, going all the way to n minus 2 and then n minus 1. Okay. So this is the total number of comparisons for all stages, right? So now I am on slide 17. So in the previous slide we saw what is the total number of comparisons of all stages, 1 plus 2 plus 3 all the way till n minus 1. So this is a very simple mathematical series, and the answer for this is evaluates to n into n minus 1 by 2. Okay. So n into n minus 1 by 2. Now for a very large value of n, we ignore the minus 1. Okay. So for a large n, n and n minus 1 roughly equivalent. Right. So therefore what we get is now n into n by 2, n square by 2. So which means that number of comparisons is n square by 2. Now note that the other operation was swap, because after a comparison, if you determine that the two compared elements are out of sequence, you've got to swap them. So now how many swaps do we have? Well, in the worst case, each and every comparison would lead to a swap. In the example that we considered here, this is not the worst case. Because you see towards the end stages, they are already in sequence. If you see at the end of stage 3, you can see the whole array is sorted. But if you look at the worst case, in the worst case, you'll see that for every comparison, you will have to do a swap. So to give an example, you can try to do bubble sort on the array 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so try to do bubble sort on the array 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So in this case, if you do all the steps, you will observe that each and every comparison will be leading to a swap. Each comparison will be leading to a swap. And here we are looking at the worst case performance. So in the worst case, every comparison leads to a swap. So therefore number of swaps is also n square divided by 2. Total number of operations, number of comparisons plus number of swaps. So we're not using a lot of math here. We're not using a lot of notation, but it will be n squared by 2 plus n squared by 2, which is n square. So we can say that the worst case complexity of bubble sort is of the order of n square. Okay, so which means if you have 10 elements, then what is the complexity? 10 square about 100. So you can see it for large values of n, this can go quite high. So in general, this is not regarded as a very low complexity. Log n is definitely better. Okay. So in this way, we can derive the complexity for bubble sort, which is of the order of n square. Okay. Okay, so now I am on slide number 18. Computation cost as a function of input size for various complexities. So here we have a table in which we have three different complexities: log n, and n square. So log n, we saw that that was a complexity for which one? Binary search. N was the complexity for which one? Worst case complexity for linear search. Also finding a maximum. N square was the worst case complexity for which algorithm? Bubble sort. So this just compares. So the numbers you see for n is 2, log n is that 1, n square is 4. So you can see as n increases, the differences also increase. For n is a 4096, because the 4096 is 2 raised to 12, log n is 12. N square is, you can see, 16777 So generally from this algorithm, from this chart, you can see that lowest complexity by far is log n. So if you encounter any algorithm which has log n complexity, you can be assured that it's a very good one. Okay. And n is not that bad, and then n square is of course large. So in this way, you can see that if you draw the curves, you can see the slopes. Slope for n square would be really high, and then n would be a bit less, and then log n would be even lower. So anyway, the point is that log n complexity would result in smaller number of operations. 12 is much smaller than 4096, and a lot more smaller than 16777 Okay, so with the log complexity, you have a smaller number of comparisons, and lesser comparisons means your procedure will execute faster, because each comparison takes certain amount of time, and assuming all comparisons take the same amount of time, less comparisons means total time to run the algorithm is less, right? And then n is a bit better, and I'm sorry, n is worse than log n but better than n square, and n square is the worst. Okay, so I hope that is clear. To summarize, log n is the best complexity, which means that the number of key operations will be minimum in this for size n, and therefore algorithms with this complexity will run very quickly. If a complexity is n, they will run in between, not very less, not a lot. If the complexity is n square, they will take a long time. And as you see, as n increases, n square really shoots up. So for very large values of n, the performance will be slower and slower. Okay. So I hope that's clear. Okay, so now I am on slide 19, and here we talk about average case complexity. So next couple of slides we'll briefly introduce this average case complexity as well. So note that for an algorithm or program, we can have different kind of complexities: best case, worst case, average case. So we have looked at best and worst cases. For example, for linear search, best case complexity is of the order of 1, right? The first comparison you do, you get a hit. Worst case complexity is of the order of n. In the worst case, you have to look at all the array elements. So what about the average case? What about average case complexity? In practical applications, in the real world, it may be more important to have a measure of the expected complexity of a given algorithm rather than worst case. So worst case sort of gives you an upper bound. Best case gives you a lower bound. Average case may be more realistic. That's one way of looking at it, right? So let's talk a bit about this average case complexity. Okay, so now I'm on slide 20. So this average case complexity, we'll use linear search as the example. So for linear search algorithm, so I'm on slide 20. For linear search algorithm, how likely is it that the search element is always at the end of the array? It may not be always. This is the worst case, right? So if you start at A0, the search element is at AN minus 1. So probably not very realistic, right? So which means that every time you run the algorithm, you may not have to do n number of comparisons. So let's look at the average case. So first, let's assume that the key, right? The key is equally likely to be found at any position in the array. Okay, so we have different positions. Let's say it's a 10 element array, A0, A1, A2, A3 going up till A9. So we assume that the key is equally likely to be found at any position. Okay, so equal probability of getting it at A0 or A1 or A2 all the way till A9. So that is a probability that the search element X will be found at position 1 is 1 by n. Probability that the search element X will be found at position 2 is also 1 by n, and so on. So which means it's equally likely, the search element is equally likely to be found in all indexes. Because if you think about it, let's say if I say that there is a 100% probability that the search element will always be found at the middle, right? 100% probability that the search element will always be found in the middle of the array. So then I just need to go to the middle and one comparison and I'm done. Okay, but that's not useful for us here. What we'll say here is that the probability of finding the search element is equal for each and every index in the array. Okay, so we'll make that assumption. So on generalizing, the probability that the search element is found at index I is 1 by n for all values of I. So if n is 10 element array. So probability of search element being found at index 0 is 1 by 10, index 1 1 by 10, index 2 1 by 10, and so on and so forth. Add all of them up, 1. Okay, so now I am on slide number 21. Slide 21, linear search average case analysis. So now the question before us is what is the average search cost to find what is the average cost to find the search element? We know in the best case it is 1. We know in the worst case it is n. What is it in the average case? Right. So again, as we have done before, let's try to work with a small value for n and then we'll try to generalize it. So now let's say for an array of size 5, n is equal to 5, what is the average search cost? Right. So average cost for searching for an element in a 5 element array. Best is 1, worst is 5. So it's equal to total cost for finds at all positions divided by number of positions. So for example, now the question is if I'm starting from the left, so what is the total cost for finding it at position A0? Cost is 1 because I have to do one comparison. What is the search cost for finding the element at index 1? So what is the cost for finding the element at A1? Well, it is 2. Why? Because 2 comparisons. One with A0, one with A1. Right? For A2, 3. Search cost is 3 because 3 comparisons. With A0, then with A1, then with A2. So then what is the total cost for finds at all positions? Total search cost. So we add up the number of comparisons. 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 and divide by number of positions. So 15 by 5 is 3. Clear, right? So search cost for element being found at A0 is 1. Search cost for element being found at A1 is 2. So likewise, search cost for it being found at A4 is 5. So total number of comparisons 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5. Right, and then you divide by number of positions, divide by 5. So now your average number of comparisons is 3. So makes sense. Average number of comparisons is 3. So now we can generalize to n positions. right? The above equations, 1 plus 2 above equation, 1 plus 2 plus 3 all the way till n, divide by n into n plus 1 by 2 divide by n. So n it's equal to n plus 1 divided by 2. For large n we can ignore the plus 1, so n by 2. So which means for n positions, average search cost, in other words average number of comparisons, is n by 2. So intuitively that does sound good. Okay. So now I am on slide 22. So as just to carry over from the previous one, the final expression we get is n plus 1 by 2, which is n divided by 2. Right? We can, if we want, we can ignore the plus 1 for large values of n. So to sum up, what is our analysis for linear search? Best case complexity of the order of 1 comparison. Average case complexity of the order of n plus 1 by 2 or n by 2. That's average case complexity, and worst case complexity is n. So O of 1 is less than O of n plus 1 by 2 is less than n. So in this way, we can also look at the average case complexity. So which means there's no way it will take less than one comparison. There's no way it will take more than n comparisons. And average case it takes n plus 1 by 2 comparisons. So in this way we can also do an analysis for the average case complexity. Okay, so here we have just introduced the average case complexity. On an average, how many operations will be done. So generally you'll see that the expression will be will be in between the best and worst case. Okay, so now I am on slide number 23, and the title of this slide is complexity of linked list operations. Okay. So in the previous slides we have discussed, given an algorithm, given a procedure for solving a specific computing problem, how can we do a complexity analysis, right? So the goal is to perform a complexity analysis of a particular algorithm, of a particular procedure. So there we discussed different kinds of complexities: worst case complexity, best case complexity, and then later average case complexity, right? So what we'll do in these last two slides is try to think about the complexity of operations on a linked list, right? So we have studied linked lists in great detail, right? So we know that they are a collection of nodes, right? And they are connected using pointers. So each node is typically a structure variable, right? Of node data type, right? So node is, we had a struct node, so which implies that node was a structure, right? Which was a complex data type, and then each specific node was a structure variable, an instance of that data type, a variable of that data type, right? So each node can have many values associated with it. Typically we had an integer value and a pointer to the next node, right? There can be more values also. Okay. So for example, in the case of a binary tree, we saw that each node has an int value, and instead of one pointer, it has two pointers: pointer to left child and pointer to the right child. So now coming back to this complexity of linked list operations, consider a linked list consisting of a data element, which is an integer, and a pointer to the next node. Okay. So a linked list with a data element, which is an integer, and a pointer to the next node. Okay. So now the question is, what is the worst case complexity? Okay, so worst case complexity of the following operations. Okay. Operations are adding a node to the linked list, removing a node from the linked list, searching for a node in the linked list. So here we can assume that the list is unsorted. Okay. So which means that the nodes can appear in any order. So maybe the first node has data element value 5, next node has data element value 1, third node has data element value 10. So those nodes can be arranged in any random order with respect to their data elements. Okay. So now for an unsorted linked list, what is the complexity of add, remove, and search operations? Okay, so now I am on slide 24, linked list operations. So what is the complexity for adding a node? So it's an unsorted list. So we can add the new node pretty much anywhere, and we will add it at the head, let's say, right? Or we can also add it at the tail, not a problem. So let's say you want to add it at the head. So now what will happen is, the way the operation add node operation will happen is, so now we know that at all times we have a pointer which points to the head node of the linked list, right? So what we'll do is, first we'll reserve using malloc, we'll reserve memory for the new node that we want to add, right? And malloc will return a pointer to that, right? And now what we will do is, for the new node that we want to add, it will have a next pointer component, right? And we make that next pointer component point to the old head node. Okay, so that's one thing we do. Make the next pointer component of the new node that we are just about to add. So make that next pointer component point to the old head node. We do that, and then we register this newly added node as the latest or the new head. Okay, so we do that, and so in that way we can add a node. And what is the complexity of that? It's the order of 1. It's only one operation, because we are working with only one node. We only have to look at the head node, and then we have to do some computation with it. We don't need to scan, or we don't need to do operations on any other node except the head node. Okay, so therefore the complexity is of the order of 1. So you can see that in this way, adding a node to a linked list is much more efficient than adding a value to an array. So imagine if you have an array, let's say of 10 elements, and you want to add one element to it. Well, I think probably if the array is unsorted, then the complexity of that will also be of the order of 1. Yeah, probably that. Yeah. So the array is not a good example, but again, the advantage of linked list is that the size can be determined at runtime, something which is not possible with an array, right? So for add node, the complexity is of the order of 1. Okay. So because once again, because the operation that we do is only with the head node. Okay. We don't need to examine any other nodes in the list. Okay. Now, what about search? Right? What about search? So if you want to search for a node, of course, this is easy because it's unsorted. We may, in the worst case, we'll need to examine all the elements. If the linked list was sorted, then of course we could use binary search, and we could get our element worst case in log to the base 2n number of comparisons, so which we've seen. But because this list is not sorted, so complexity of searching is of the order of n. In the worst case, we have to examine all the nodes. What about removing a node? So this is of the order of n, because first we have to search, right? First we have to search for the data item that we want to remove, and that search we just saw in the worst case can take n operations, because we have to examine, in the worst case we have to examine all the nodes. So we have n nodes, right? So n operations. Okay. So for searching, it's of the order of n. For removing, it's only one operation. So when you have to remove a node in a linked list, then what do you need to do? right? So let's say if the node is the last node, then you just for the second last node, the next pointer component you point it to null, and then for the last node you just call free, right? So in this way, you can remove node. If you want to remove a node which is not at the end, sometime in somewhere in the middle, well, that can also be removed. All you need to do is the node that you want to remove, you first examine what the previous node is, and for that previous node, the value of the next pointer component, what it will originally contain is the memory address of the node that you want to remove, right? So you replace that with the memory address of the next node, right? If it exists. If it doesn't, then null. So then once you do that, then you can call a free operation on the node that you want to remove. So as such, it's only one operation, because generally, you only have to once you know which node you have to remove, then you just perform an operation on that node, right? So once you know which node you want to remove, right, whether it's the first or second or in the middle or the last, once you know which node you have to remove, then it's just one operation, right? You just call free. Okay. So for searching it's n, and then for deletion it's of the order of 1. Okay. So then it becomes n plus 1 of the order of n. So once again, when we want to add a node, because it's unsorted, we'll just add it at one end. So the complexity will be of the order of 1. We only need to examine one node, either the head or tail, right? When we have to search, in the worst case, because its list is unsorted, we may have to look at all the nodes. So complexity is of the order of n. And lookups. And when we have to remove, as such, for the removal, the complexity is only 1, because if we know which node we want to remove, we just operate on that single node and no other node. So the complexity is 1, but to search for it, complexity is n. So hidden in the removal is a search. So you can say that if you don't know which node you have to remove, then the overall complexity of the removal is of the order of n. N to search, 1 to remove, n plus 1 is roughly n. On the other hand, if you know which node you have to remove, then the complexity of the remove operation is of the order of 1. Okay? Because we know which node we have to remove, so we do a removal operation of only that node. Okay? So I hope the add, search and remove complexities are clear. Okay.